Hello, my friends. On October 20, 2014, France learned with shock about the violent death of the chief executive officer of Total, Mr. Christophe de Margerie. He died at Moscow Airport Vnukovo under dramatic circumstances that I will tell you about today. The adventure started on October 19th, 2014 with a flight from Le Bourget. It was a Falcon 50 private jet piloted by two men, a captain, a former military man who had worked or who had been in the French army, in the French Air Force. He had flown many planes. Someone very experienced and super meticulous and organized, as you would expect military people to be. On his right, a pilot with experience, a co-pilot with mainly civilian experience. And in the back, there was Mr. de Margerie and there was a flight attendant. On planes of this size, the law does not require having a flight attendant, but often, regardless of the passenger profile, it's a good idea to include a flight attendant to be able to provide quality service to the client. Subtitles ST. The plane lands smoothly at Moscow Vnukovo Airport, and then there's a ground handling company that will take care of everyone. They'll take them to the hotel, then everyone will go about their business. Mr. de Margerie will go meet with Russian officials, while the pilots wait on standby to be called for the return trip. The next day, October 2nd, is the day of the return. Around midday, the pilots are transported, still by the same ground handling company, to Vnukovo Airport. They take possession of the plane and start preparing everything. They file the flight plan, check the weather, and as the co-pilot will say at one point, they even prepare the toilet paper. They're there, and after 6 hours, even though the Falcon's cockpit isn't without its charm, after 6 hours, they're literally climbing the walls. They're getting impatient. They're just waiting for permission for their client to arrive and for them to be allowed to leave. At that moment at Vnukovo Airport, it's getting later and later, almost midnight. It's nighttime, it's winter, it's cold, and a fog is starting to settle over the airport. Visibility is only a few hundred meters. It's not a thick fog you could cut with a knife, but it's still a fog that hides the facilities and covers the area a bit. Visibility is estimated at the time the plane was cleared for takeoff. The runway visual range, he was told runway visibility was about 1,000 meters. Anyway, before talking about takeoff, let's talk about what was happening at the airport. So at the airport, there were snow removal teams. Snow removal is crucial at these airports in winter. Without it, runways would disappear after 2 days. So there's a team made up of a supervisor in his vehicle plus 3 snowplows. The snowplows drive in single file. They have metal rollers at the front, kind of like brushes that scrape the snow. The snow will be sucked up and thrown out by a kind of chute. It will be thrown to the sides of the runway. It will be thrown off the runway. It's a 4. To cross the runways or enter the runways, you must always ask for permission from the control tower. International Civil Aviation Organization is very clear. Vehicles that need to cross the runways, whether they are planes, trucks, or others, that need to enter the runways, even temporarily, or cross or drive along them, must ask for permission to do so. On the same frequency that we use for landings and takeoffs. So even when there is a ground controller, his jurisdiction ends there. At the runway level, you have to switch to the control tower frequency, and when you leave the runway, you go back to the ground controller. I was saying that the supervisor is the one who handles the communication. The guys who are in their snowplows, even if they have radios, they don't talk to the control tower. Usually, there's a supervisor who's always there. And by the way, when you go to airports, I can show you footage I filmed at Charles de Gaulle Airport. You often see, even sometimes in the summer, snowplows driving around like that. There's also a supervisor who practices with them, even when the weather is nice. For snowy days, he practices the actions, the routines he has to do, the permissions he has to ask for in order to clear the snow safely. The three machines, so the three snowplows driving in a line with under the supervision of a guy who's in his car with a driver, get to work and keep clearing the snow non-stop. At this time, Mr. de Margerie arrives at the airport. The handling company sends someone to pick him up at the terminal. These handling companies are absolutely necessary for ground operations. They have people who speak the local language, who can help find a passenger who got lost. But to get through security, to find an operations office, to file a flight plan, to get the weather, to get food, to take someone to the hotel, to bring them back from the hotel, and generally they even have a frequency. At the airport level, pilots can even contact them when they're in flight or when they're approaching or so on. Usually their agents stand in front of the plane until the doors close, until the pilot is in contact with the controller who gives permission to start up. So these are companies that provide ground services for private jets and even for the airlines, you know. I was saying that he's bringing back Mr. Margerie. As soon as the pilots know their client is there, they see the van approaching. They contact the control tower to activate the flight plan and start the procedure to leave. In fact, in just a few minutes, they're already ready to taxi and get clearance. Let's go back to our snowplows. The snowplow number 2 is the middle one, with the others being 1 and 3. At the bar, this rotating bar that spins, that hits against something, and then one of the blades will tighten. The snowplow isn't immobilized, it can still move, but it can't do its job anymore. It can't clear the snow with its claws, which are damaged. Our supervisor is really troubled because out of the 3 snowplows, 1 isn't working anymore. It can still drive and stay centered, which is what it should have done. Let it finish. Finish the shift like this, without doing anything, and then take care of it later. But he doesn't want to do that. He wants to find a solution, so he'll try to improvise. This improvisation will be the beginning of a chain of dramatic events that will follow one after another. What is the supervisor going to do? He is going to go to the driver of snowplow number 2 and tell him, listen, you need to come back to the terminal, to the workshops, so we can give you your spot back. The device that scrapes the snow. Of course, the snowplow driver isn't used to interacting with the controllers over the radio and all that. The supervisor suggests, he says, follow me and I'll take you to the terminal. And he will leave snowplows number 2 and 3 behind him, continuing the work. An absolutely disastrous decision. Because those 2 will now act without supervision. The supervisor arrives, so at the terminal, drops off, then brings back before the gate snowplow number 2, and then he turns around with his driver. And they come back to find snowplows number 2, number 1, and 3. The problem is that in the fog at night, he can't find snowplow number 3 anymore. Now his worry grows. He knows there are operations, even if it's late. In the last hour, they've had 2 landings and 8 takeoffs, so the traffic is relatively light that night. But at the same time, that damn snowplow, they have to find it and find it quickly, because it could be anywhere, including right in the middle of a runway. The supervisor asks his driver to speed up. The driver floors it and they rush out in their car, speeding as fast as they can. In the fog, in the dark, searching for that lost machine. Meanwhile, in the Falcon, Mr. de Margerie lies. The doors close. The Falcon is cleared to taxi. Since it's the first time these pilots have come to this airport, and given the weather conditions, the controller sends them a follow me car, like those at airports, with a big sign on top that says follow me. follow me, follow us. So they just have to follow this car and it will take them to the point, to the entrance of the runway so they can take off. This service is available on arrival, but also on departure. In fact, I remember once at an airport where there was so much fog. The plane landed using instrument landing system, category 3, so visibility was either 0 or almost 0. He leaves the runway, he exits the runway, he asks for a follow me car because he couldn't see anything. The guy from the follow me car goes to get the plane, and at some point he runs into it because he didn't see it. Sometimes the fog is so thick that planes can land, but driving isn't safe. I was saying that the plane, the Falcon 50, starts following the follow me car Kilo Man to the place where it can take off. Not from the very beginning of it, but a little bit further in, let's say, because there were some small repairs at the start of the runway. Meanwhile, our supervisor is very worried. He's looking everywhere. He can't find us. The snowplow? Well, it was supposed to make a cross. At that point, he had two options. First option, take the radio, call the controller, and say nothing. I'm missing a snowplow and don't know its location. In that case, the air traffic controller would have immediately asked the Falcon to stand by, not to move, to wait until they found it. Then, 2 or 3 minutes later, he would have said, okay, cleared for takeoff, because they just found the snowplow. He won't do it. He had the second option. The snowplow guy has a radio, so he could have called and said, snowplow number 3, where are you? Tell me where you are. He could have done it, but he won't. Why not? The fact that he does nothing is going to condemn people to death tonight, and he knows it and he feels it. He knows the danger. He's in extreme panic because he knows the danger he's causing to air traffic. But he won't want to call. He won't want to make that life-saving radio call. Why know something? It has almost no connection. Of a Russian accident. You read, without finding at some point the involvement of alcohol, endemic alcoholism. Among pilots, among controllers, among ground agents, baggage handlers, everyone is more or less drunk. To such an extent that it's one of the few countries, Russia, where everyone who works at an airport, when they arrive in the morning, has to undergo a medical checkup. So the medical checkup, the doctor is supposed to, as you can see in some images, take blood pressure, measure the pulse, check the temperature, and ask questions. A general practitioner's checkup. The reality is that the doctor's there with his list. People pass in front of him. That's it. If you can walk mostly straight, aren't crawling, and don't reek of alcohol, you pass. What the employees of many airports do, including pilots, by the way, to, let's say, cheat this system, what they do is they bring their bottle with them and they drink, not before arriving at work, but during. So when they have their medical check, everything is fine. There is no alcohol problem at that stage. As soon as they get past the doctor, they start drinking. That night, the supervisor had already had quite a bit of alcohol, but look, he was already drunk. The snowplow drivers had a blood alcohol level twice that of the supervisor. Good thing he was driving sitting down, right? But since, anyway, their job was just to stick with the supervisor, follow him, and let him handle things. I'll say they drank twice as fast. Why didn't the supervisor act? That call? Because if he calls the control tower and tells them, I've lost him, who's the supervisor? I've lost a snowplow, that's significant. It would have triggered an investigation. An incident. That's something. Sorry, but the guy who's supposed to supervise a snowplow, I don't know where he is at an airport. It's an incident. An incident means an investigation. It means people are going to come and ask questions right away on the spot. We would have seen that he had been drinking. Maybe not trigger an incident. He could have called on the radio, the snowplow. Yes, but the frequency, it's also monitored by air traffic control. It would have done exactly the same thing if he had called the guy on the radio. But where are you? I can't see or find you. Air traffic control would ask, what are we doing? No one is supervising, which would have caused an incident and shown the guys were drinking. So, what the guy wants by rushing into the night, he just wants to find that damn plane. And for things to get back to normal and for no one to notice anything. Subtitling ST. Meanwhile, the Falcon arrives near the runway and slowly begins its approach. What is happening with Snowplow number 3 is during their work, Snowplow number 1 had discovered a piece of light of broken runway, maybe broken by a snowplow or a plane that rolled over it or something else. He calls the technicians, they handle the lights. He tells them, I just found a piece of broken light. Don't you want to come see? They bring their Ford and come check it out with flashing lights. The snowplow guy who was lost, number 3. He's looking for his buddies. He's out there in the night. And he starts making completely irrational routes. He's completely lost in the fog, the mental fog, the weather fog, the effect of alcohol, the panic. He doesn't know where his colleagues are. He starts searching. He sees lights near runway 06. He thinks it's his buddies, but actually, it's not. Those were the technicians who were coming to fix the light. So he's doing weird things. He turns around. He doesn't really know where he's going. And then, at one point, he finds himself near the entrance to the runway. 06 subtitling ST501 done. For the Falcon 50, the clearance to take off, I have to say in their defense of the air traffic controller, that at the moment he gives the clearance to the Falcon to take off, the runway was clean. It was really clear. There was nothing on it. The French were slightly behind on their checklist when they receive clearance to take off. They're not going to take off right away. They had overdue checklists that they needed to complete. So what do? They're going to complete them. They're going to lose 37 seconds. They're going to lose 37 seconds. Between the moment they're cleared for takeoff and the moment they throttle up. Meanwhile, and without referring to anyone, Snowplow number 3 is going to enter runway 06. He's going to go up it, turn around. He doesn't really know what he's doing, and he's going to stop across it, and he's driving at about 20 km/h. In the Falcon 50, it's the captain who throttles up to accelerate. He's the one who pilots the plane on the ground. Because there's a feature in the Falcon which is actually found on many planes. By the way, it's only on the captain's side that there's a small steering wheel that allows you to steer the plane on the ground. There isn't one on the co-pilot side, but that night it was the co-pilot who was supposed to do the takeoff. So one particularity of the Falcon is that it's when the co-pilot does the takeoff. Since the directional control, the rudder of the Falcon is quite small, especially because it has 3 engines all at the back. It's not a plane that even with an engine out will experience significant asymmetry, so its rudder is a bit undersized. So when the co-pilot has to do the takeoff, the captain advances the throttles and keeps control of the plane. Up to 80 knots, 150 km/h. And at that speed, he gives the controls to the co-pilot because at 80 knots, you have control with the rudder. Powerful enough that you no longer need the yoke, which is only on the captain's side. That night, the decision was that the co-pilot should do the takeoff. Okay, the captain applies the throttle. Seated in the back of the cabin are Mr. de Margerie and the flight attendant. Neither of them is wearing a seatbelt or a harness or anything else. One of the features of private jets is that precisely no one bothers you about the seatbelt or bothers you about a mask or bothers you about a cigarette or anything else. That's the advantage of traveling in this kind of aircraft. The plane accelerates. And at 78 knots, so 145 kilometers per hour, the captain will exclaim in French and say, "But what is that?" A car crosses the road. He spots Snowplow number 3. He's now 730 meters away. He's more than 700 meters away, but that's a distance that's decreasing very quickly. However, the Falcon is accelerating. It was calculated that if he is at this stage, at the moment when he says hola, there's a car crossing the road. He had slammed on the brakes, he had brought the engines down to zero, you could see the thrust reversers. Actually, there was only one on engine number 2, the one in the middle. He would have stopped before hitting the snowplow. Tests done by the company that makes this aircraft showed that if he had started braking without using the thrust reverser, because for acceleration to stop performance, manufacturers don't always have the information with their thrust reversers. Because in certification tests, braking must be demonstrated without the thrust reverser. In any case, the calculation by the company that makes the plane says that if he had braked at the moment he saw that, when he said, "That's a car crossing the road," he probably would have. He would have reached the snowplow at a speed of 20 knots. Which is about 37 kilometers per hour. That would have allowed him, yes. So if he had used the thrust reverser, it's clear that he probably would have stopped 20 meters earlier. Or, in the worst case, he would have hit the snowplow at a speed of about 40 kilometers per hour. So it would have caused some damage, but it wouldn't have had a fatal outcome. Or the speed would have been so slow that it would have allowed him to steer the plane in a controlled way and avoid hitting the snowplow. In any case, at 78 knots, wow, that's like a car crossing the road. A moment later, they reach 80 knots and the co-pilot says, "My controls." Okay, your controls. And it seems like it's almost as if the captain can't believe his eyes at that point. If he was cleared for takeoff, the controller knows what he's doing. That means the runway is clear. But you know, you're in Russia. The controller, either he got the wrong runway, or he's drunk, or he lied to you, or someone entered without asking the controller for permission, which was the case here, right? Somewhere he won't believe his eyes. The co-pilot takes control and the plane keeps accelerating toward its fate. The plane accelerates. Meanwhile, in front of them, there are the flashing lights and strobes of the snowplow stopped in the middle of the runway. At one point, around 129, he realizes the snowplow is there, and it's getting bigger and bigger. What do? Rotation speed. The co-pilot pulls on the control stick, and the black box shows that the speed at which he pulled on the control stick was not different from the speed that was, or the rate that was used on previous flights. That means he's making a normal takeoff. He pulls back gradually to take off. There's no attempt to pull abruptly or sharply. It's only when the impact was practically certain, he's going to make it look like he's going to pull on the control stick abruptly this time. So the rotation, the nose up for takeoff, will happen in 2 stages. First as normal as possible, then a second stage. Someone who actually sees this time the almost certain impact, who pulls abruptly on the control stick. And the next moment, whether it's him or probably someone else, the captain pushes on the control stick. To avoid a stall, it's important to understand that being too abrupt can cause the plane to stall. That being said, we definitely had a high energy impact with the truck. Here people say, "Whoa, the truck." There they react, "Whoa, did you see the truck?" The plane was never near stalling. It stayed well below the stall angle. It was calculated in the simulations, which were done by the Russians, that if the takeoff movement had been firmer, more abrupt, like, I don't care. I pull, I go all the way to the stick shaker. I pull, it goes tick, 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 tick. I keep it at that level, and then I push. He would have made it. Calculations showed they could lift off 100 meters before the wheels left the ground. 100 meters before impact. They would have just cleared it over the aircraft. It's too late there. It's too late. The impact is certain. The plane pitches up. It barely rises off the ground, and bam, the right wing is going to get caught. It's going to get caught in the snowplow. The right wing will literally split open like a watermelon falling to the ground. It will split open from end to end, from front to back, and torrents of fuel will start pouring out. The plane, almost at that very second, at the moment of impact, the destabilization, so the wing, that is suddenly blocked like that against the snowplow. This violent jolt will cause the plane to flip over. The plane veers to the right, 5 degrees to the right. The pilot turns the control stick all the way to the left. That's the last action he'll take, but this action isn't meant to save, it's too late. The plane flips over and leaves, veers to the right, leaves the runway axis, leaves the runway, leaves, and is going to crash. And make a big fireball, catch fire immediately. In fact, even before hitting the ground. The emergency services then. The driver of snowplow number 3 isn't injured or anything. He's just a bit shaken up. The snowplow is a bit dented because it got hit by the wing. But otherwise, he's fine. He's just a bit shocked. He's drunk, but he's doing just fine. The plane crashes farther away, as I was saying. The fuselage falls, so the wheels are up in the air. It's flipped over. The controller sees a flash. He presses the crash horn. Within minutes, practically in a minute and a half, there are several trucks that start to arrive. They arrive one after another and immediately start spraying the scene. After about 10 or 15 minutes, the medical services are there. They manage to open a door of the Falcon. He has some tearing, a bit of tearing under ST-501. She was thrown towards the front of the aircraft since she wasn't strapped in. The kind is dead, of course. After that, during this time, the firefighters attack the cockpit area. They start with circular saws, cutting pieces of the structure to reach the pilots. They manage to reach them about half an hour after the crash, and they get them out. Both of them are dead. The captain died on impact. He died instantly. The co-pilot didn't. He died, as the Russians say. It took him a few dozen seconds to die. There is soot in his trachea. There is soot in his lungs. So he didn't die right away, but he died when the fire broke out. Mr. de Margerie himself will find him an hour and 10 minutes later. They'll have to cut. It's by cutting a bit deeper into the fuselage that they'll find him inside. He's dead too, so the accident killed 4. For your information, the airport, which was in the process of applying to be able to use Instrument Landing System 4 to 3, had been equipped with a ground radar. It was equipped with a ground radar, which showed the intrusion, which showed the arrival of the snowplow, which showed the conflict building between the plane and the snowplow. However, there were only 3 controllers on the entire platform, 3 controllers who had been trained to use the ground radar, and none of the 3 were working. That day, the controller had just 1 radar screen among 100 workstations on the right. But it seems that no one really paid attention because he didn't really know how to use it, what the different alerts meant, or how to handle them. Afterwards, of course, the rest is just endless stories of everyone filing complaints against each other. There were convictions, there were immediate amnesties. I don't think anyone actually ended up in prison. The plane's insurers turned against the airport, demanding the amounts they had paid to their clients. And then, of course, usually the legal sagas related to accidents sometimes last 10, 15, even 20 years, whereas the administrative and technical part is usually resolved after 18 months or 2 years when a report is released. And then for the aviation authorities, it's over. But for the courts, it can go on forever. So that's it, my friends. It was the accident that took the life of Mr. de Margerie, the president of Total at the time, at Moscow Vnukovo Airport, UUWW for its Airports Council International Code. And then I'll see you in another video and we'll talk about another case. See you very soon, and thank you for listening until now. I'll see you in another video and we'll talk about another case.